Hey guys, so this time I'm gonna react to Tucker Carlson's video. On my last stream, I was reacting to Jimmy Dore, and I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a lot of overlap this time. I'm a refugee from Ukraine, a non-Ukrainian refugee from Ukraine. So I guess that gives me a little bit of a rare perspective on the whole thing happening there. And add to that I also survived the Balkan Wars. That gives me an even more rare perspective, I guess, on all the things happening in Ukraine and a comparison to what happened in Bosnia. Things are very similar, spoiler alert. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to just play the video and see what Mr. Carlson has to say.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, here's a happy memory. By breakfast, really even brunch, on Election Day 2016, virtually nobody in Washington, D.C. thought Donald Trump could win. And they didn't.
Okay, so right from the start, the video is called "The War in Ukraine Has Nothing to Do with Ukraine," and he's leading with Trump. So this is going to be exciting.
Didn't think that because the entire press corps had been telling them for months that Trump had, as they always put it, literally no chance, not even as an abstract theoretical matter. This wasn't actually a race. In fact, come November 8th, you'll remember this, Donald Trump was going to be drowned by a towering blue tsunami and swept away forever, along with the rest of the Republican Party, the collaborators anyway.
Okay, so this is kind of true. Let's keep watching. Oops. Hey, I'm hitting their ads. Okay, so while the ads play, let's give them their due. I don't really watch Tucker Carlson. I know his positions. I know what he represents. He seems to be the populist wing of the Republican Party. And as I said, I feel there's going to be a lot of overlap with Jimmy Dore from my last stream.
Just closed in the Ohio Senate primary. One state,
Oops.
one primary early in the season, and yet the results could determine what the Republican Party looks
this
like
is a
going forward.
different video. Let's go back. Okay, here we go. And another ad. Fox News seems to be running much more aggressive ads than YouTube or anything else I've seen. But it's fine. I wonder if this video is. I wonder if that's why they keep the video on the site and don't put them on YouTube.
Here's a happy memory. By breakfast, really even brunch, on Election Day 2016,
let's skip forward a little bit.
Virtually nobody in Washington forever, along with the rest of the Republican Party, the collaborators anyway. And polling numbers seemed to confirm that this was going to happen. And so, by the way, did the private betting markets. At least one of those markets had set the spread at 80-20 for Hillary Clinton that morning. In the end, of course, they were not only wrong, they were hilariously wrong. By midnight, Trump had won. And a lot of highly educated, extremely well-credentialed people suddenly looked ridiculous. Hillary Clinton herself was so shocked.
So, yeah, pretty much, I guess. So far, so good. The polls, I think, were actually more correct than people think, but people were kind of misunderstanding the polls, maybe. So there's that. But there's, I think, no denying it. What he's saying is pretty much true.
Shocked by the results that night that she refused to give a concession speech. She went to bed hoping it was just a dream.
Ouch.
You probably remember all of that very well, but it was what happened next in the days between the election and Thanksgiving that it turns out in a lot of ways was much more important. What happened during that
going into Russiagate
course for where we are right now.
Oh my God, okay.
Speeding toward one of the great disasters in our history. So the leaders of
Okay.
the Democratic Party couldn't, in effect, handle the outcome of the 2016 election. They snapped under the strain of it, under the crushed expectations. But rather than look inward and assess their own role in the disaster, what did we do wrong? Why did voters reject us? And other questions that emotionally mature adults might have asked.
They went straight for the Russiagate. Again, I'm having trouble disagreeing with Tucker here.
Democratic leaders instead immediately set out to find somebody else to blame for the election results. And soon they settled on Russia. Vladimir Putin got Donald Trump elected, they told us. Hillary Clinton said that repeatedly.
Yeah. Anyway, let's keep moving. I'm pretty much on the same page so far.
Now, at first, it was hard to take any of it very seriously. We tried, but there was no evidence it was true at all. And so a rational person concluded the obvious. This was a childish psychological defense.
Okay, so we're kind of sliding into where I think we're going, but let's keep going.
Mechanism, it was not a factual claim. And yet they kept saying it in the face of no evidence. And over time, they began acting on it like it was true. And then even over more time, they paralyzed the entire federal government for years, fruitlessly trying to prove the core claims of Russiagate. But they never could because those claims weren't true.
Okay, so this is now sliding into something that's not entirely correct. The federal government was far from paralyzed. There was, of course, there was a lot of investigation, and we had a lot of crap from a lot of people. Many people were kind of overblowing the whole Russia thing. However, Russia has tried to influence the US election on purpose, using resources that, I mean, you could say they hacked, for example, the emails, because, you know, social engineering is hacking, so you can say that. It didn't look like the Matrix or like they show it in the movies, but they did hack by, you know, making, I guess, an older person, an elderly person click a link that they weren't supposed to click. So you can say they hacked the DNC. And then you can also say that they influenced the election by running ads, running misinformation campaigns and things like that. So it's not as if nothing happened. I totally agree that not as much has happened as people try to make it look like. And definitely the whole Mueller thing was overblown, I think, very incorrectly. In other words, there was stuff there. It's just that people were expecting something out of movies and they just got the boring reality. So, yeah, I think what Tucker is trying to say is that nothing was there. That's really not true. Russia was definitely trying to elect Trump. Russia, it's not fair to say that they tried to elect Trump. It's fair to say that they tried to disrupt the United States. So, of course, you know, if Trump is the disrupting factor, let's support Trump. If Bernie is the disrupting factor, let's support Bernie, and so on.
And yet, critically, they clung to those claims. They never stopped repeating the talking point. The Russian government, quote, hacked our election. That was Jen Psaki not long ago saying it out loud like it were true. Now, here's the context. As she said that, Psaki was trying to explain why the Biden administration is, in effect, working to overthrow the Russian government right now. And for once, Jen Psaki was telling the truth. That is why. Democrats have convinced themselves that Russia stole the presidency, which rightfully belonged to Hillary Clinton. And they mean it when they say it. And that's why they are taking us to war with Russia. Now, there are a lot of things going on here, a lot of threads as
Whoa.
a story, but on some level...
Okay, so we jumped straight from Russiagate to the war in Ukraine. My head is still spinning from that. I don't know how he did that. I don't know how that's even related, apart from Russia being the enemy of the United States, I really see no direct connection. Sure, Russia doesn't like the United States. The United States doesn't like Russia. So he's saying that the United States started the war, or I guess supported the war, or doesn't want to end the war because of Russiagate. That's his angle here. Okay, let's keep watching, I guess.
War motivation is just that simple. Here's what we know it's not. We know the war in Ukraine is not about saving democracy, please. We know it's not about protecting.
The war in Ukraine is not about saving democracy. Sure, yeah. It sounds good, but that's not really how geopolitics works. Or yeah, it's just not. Yeah, it's not. It's not as beautiful as that. Sure.
The sacred borders of a sovereign country. We know the Biden administration doesn't care about those principles because they run our country and we see how they act. And we know for dead certain, and this comes as
I'm guessing this is about the immigrants. That's a really stupid analogy. Well, okay.
sad news to a lot of Americans who are compassionate, but we know now that the war in Ukraine is certainly not about helping the Ukrainian people, those poor people. Many more Ukrainian civilians will die, certainly, thanks to the Biden administration's policies. If you
So this is completely untrue, and it could be just the fact that he doesn't understand how the war works. But yeah, definitely not. I mean, it's not. That's not how it works. The less weapons Ukraine gets, the more civilians will. Well, there we go with the ad again. The more civilians will die. Ukraine without the international support, I think, would have been in a much worse situation. Russia wouldn't have as many losses. They would have captured more ground, and definitely a lot more Ukrainians would have died. I think this assumes that Ukraine would surrender. That's not an option. That was never an option. So let's jump back.
predicting it, saying it, watch this. Not doing that, they've rejected it out of hand. So that's not their goal, saving Ukraine. Many more Ukrainian civilians will die, certainly, thanks to the Biden administration's policies. If you wanted to save Ukraine,
So again, completely untrue.
its people, its infrastructure, its nation, you would push for a settlement now. You would have done it 2 months ago, but they're not.
That's not how it works. I'm guessing it's a lack of understanding. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt and just guessing that he doesn't understand how it works. Because this is pretty much the same position that Jimmy Dore had when I was reacting to his video. Yeah, I'm just guessing he doesn't understand how it works. It's not about if Biden would, say to tell Zelensky to just, stop resisting, Zelensky would tell him to F off and continue fighting. And even with no help, Ukraine would continue fighting. So I don't see how the US can do anything other than help Ukraine in this situation. Because not helping Ukraine is basically just watching people die more. It's exactly the opposite. With less weapons, more Ukrainians would die.
Not doing that, they've rejected it out of hand. So that's not their goal, saving Ukraine, saving human lives. No, that's not their goal.
You could say that. It's one of the goals, maybe. Having said that, it's probably not the main goal that the United States has.
Instead, the war in Ukraine is designed to cause regime change in Moscow.
Okay, so we immediately jumped to something else now, which is regime change in Russia. So the war is a tool for regime change in Russia. Please tell me more.
They want to topple the Russian government. That would be payback for the 2016 election.
Okay, it all clicks together now, guys.
So this is the logical, maybe the inevitable end stage of Russiagate.
This is the inevitable stage of Russiagate. War in Ukraine is the inevitable stage of Russiagate. Okay?
Now, we should have seen this coming because they said it out loud years ago. Here's Adam Schiff from 2 years ago predicting it, saying it. Watch this.
Okay.
As one witness put it during our impeachment inquiry, the United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
So we arm Ukraine so we can fight Russia. Now, how
I mean, did he just cut off the end of that sentence, or?
many Americans, whatever you think of Putin, probably not much, justifiably, probably don't have a lot of interest in moving to Russia, but how many Americans then or now want to, quote, fight Russia? A very small group.
Didn't he say that it's it's Ukraine that's fighting Russia so that the US doesn't have to?
But Adam Schiff said it out loud at the time in the House of Representatives. We don't arm Ukraine so we can help the Ukrainians. They're merely unfortunate pawns in all of this. We arm Ukraine so that we can punish Russia. Why?
Didn't really say punish Russia. He said, I mean, what he meant was to stop Russian expansion, of course, because after Ukraine, it would be somebody else. Even now, people are talking about Moldova, Transnistria, maybe Poland is next, who knows? I'm pretty sure that's the intention of that sentence there, but let's keep moving.
For stealing Hillary Clinton's coronation. If only we had taken Adam Schiff seriously as he said it again and again and again. But now we can't help but take Adam Schiff seriously because he's one of the prime movers of this war. Adam Schiff spent this weekend in Eastern Europe checking on the progress of the war he has done so much to bring about. He
That's a really bad photo, though.
traveled there with Nancy Pelosi and a number of other of the most conspiracy-minded Democrats in Congress. These are the Russiagate true believers seeing their theory come to fruition. That's what this is. Here's the group, Pelosi, Schiff, and the rest, meeting with the president of Ukraine.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. Pleasure to meet you.
Jim McGovern from Massachusetts.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. You're here.
President,
Hi
good
again.
to see you again. Yes.
You're welcome. Hi, Jason Crow from Colorado. Nice to meet you.
Adam Schiff from California.
You're very welcome.
Honored to meet you.
So how did Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi wind up in charge of America's foreign policy as we stand on the cusp of a third world war? And why are Republicans supporting them? And what happens when you put people with a demonstrated lack of boundaries or self-control or...
Okay, how is Nancy Pelosi in charge of policy again? Wouldn't that be the executive branch? Be in charge of the policy? I mean, I'm not American. Is somebody... Can somebody correct me here?
wisdom in charge of something as important?
If anything, Nancy's just doing a photo op, and she's big on that. And you have to give her props. She's barely alive, and she traveled to Ukraine, I guess on a train. I saw some pictures from a train. Yeah, props to Nancy. I guess she doesn't eat ice cream all day.
As the fate of nations. Well, here's what happens. Watch as one after the other, the Democrats you just saw on tape announce that this regime change is not nearly over. In fact, this war has just begun. Watch.
But one thing is really clear that this delegation wanted to send, but also President Biden has made very clear with his most recent aid package request. It is a historic request that we're going to push hard in the United States Congress to help pass. And it sends a very simple message. We are not interested in stalemates. We are not interested in going back to the status quo. The United States of America is in this to win it. And we will stand with Ukraine until victory is won.
That was Congressman Jason Crow,
Okay.
confirmed buffoon, telling us that
Okay.
we're not in it to achieve a stalemate. We're? Really? Some of us were under the impression, based on their public statements, that we were defending the sovereignty of another country, Ukraine, that it's not up to us, it's up to the voters of Ukraine, because Ukraine's a democracy.
What's up to voters of Ukraine? What, if the war will end, or maybe I missed something here?
But here's Congressman Crow telling us we're not going to accept a, quote, stalemate. We're in it to win it. We're going to win. We're here till we get victory. Well, that raises the obvious question, what is winning? What is victory? How do we know when we've won? Well, Jason Crow didn't tell us. And not...
So obviously victory is having Russia get out of Ukraine. Simple as that, I think. Any kind of Russian presence in Ukraine will only prolong the conflict. So winning would be just getting them out. The interesting conversation starts when we get back to the initial positions before the war, right? What happens once we reach Donbass with Ukraine? What happens then? Do we stop, or do we take Donbass? Does Ukraine take Donbass, or do they just stop and have peace negotiations? Same thing for Crimea. Crimea is very difficult to take by ground, and Ukraine doesn't have any navy to speak of. So I guess that's just a practical difficulty that's going to prevent probably Crimea from being taken immediately. But Donbass can be. And so I think these people are probably just repeating what Zelensky told them. That would be my guess. What Zelensky told them, which is, yeah, we don't want to negotiate. There's no point to do that right now. Russia doesn't want it anyway. Russia's trying to get as much territory as possible. So they wouldn't, it would be fake negotiations in any case, because it's pretty much very hard to negotiate with Russia. So, yeah, I mean, the only logical thing you can do is to just kick them out. And that would be the definition. I don't think Ukraine would go into Russian territory or do anything crazy like that. So, I mean, it's pretty well defined.
Neither, by the way, did Nancy Pelosi. She just said we're going to keep sending weapons to Ukraine, quote, until the fight is done.
Sure.
We believe that we are visiting you to say thank you for your fight for freedom, that we are on a frontier of freedom, and that your fight is a fight for everyone. And so our commitment is to be there for you until the fight is done.
So she's kind of better sounding than Biden, right? So Biden, age 78, and Pelosi, age 'come on, Bing. Pelosi, age 82. Okay. Biden is 79, and this woman is 82 years old. She traveled to Ukraine. She took a train, and she's speaking more or less coherently, I guess. Sometimes she's having problems pronouncing words with her teeth implants or whatever, but yeah, props to her. Hey.
How did we get here exactly? Do you feel betrayed? If you're one of the millions of good-hearted Americans who put a Ukrainian flag pin on your lapel or put one in front of your house expressing solidarity with the poor oppressed people of Ukraine, you probably didn't think you were signing up for this. Nancy Pelosi telling us we're in a war with a nuclear-armed power with no clear end date.
Does any war have an end date? Is he for real? I mean, you fight until the war is over. There are no boots on the ground. There's not going to be any boots on the ground. There's not going to be even, I'm pretty sure at this point, there's not going to be a NATO intervention either, unless things escalate really, really hard and quick. So, yeah, I mean, it's just about sending support. Sure. Europe is doing the same thing.
Seen that movie before? Oh, we just finished one after 20 years in Afghanistan. Well,
Oh God. Okay. This is not. Yeah. It's not even remotely similar to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was an invasion by the US. The government was toppled by the US. The US tried to nation build, they tried to rebuild, they tried to train, they tried to build the country, even patriotism. All of these things are completely unnecessary in Ukraine. Ukraine is it's okay. Ukraine is fine. Ukraine just needs the weapons. Unlike the Afghanistan army, Ukrainians are, I think, better equipped to handle those weapons. It's not going to go to waste. It's not going to rust on an airfield or whatever. It's going to be actually used for for a productive purpose. So there is very little in common. I think it's a very false analogy.
like that. This is an open-ended conflict, said Nancy Pelosi, just like the war on terror. And just in case you missed it, they all repeated that line. Here's your nightmare again. Adam Schiff in charge of the war against Russia. Watch.
The whole freedom-loving world has an interest in the outcome of this war and ensuring that Ukraine is victorious. And we are determined to do everything in our power to make it so. We are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and we will until victory is won.
I love his face, by the way. That didn't disappoint.
These people are playing dress up. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they don't care. They get to pretend to be statesmen for a day. But when Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, again, people with a demonstrated years-long record of being willing to say anything for personal power, anything to improve the fortunes of their political party, when they're standing up with a foreign head of state saying, here's an open check, you fill in the number.
I mean, it's not like they went there and did that. It went through the usual process, and there was a vote, and most Republicans actually voted for that. There were, I think, 10 votes against it, so it's not like Nancy went there and just gave them the checkbook or...
You got to wonder where this is going. We know where it could go. This is the most reckless foreign policy in our lifetimes, in American history. You are watching a group of decadent, in some cases senile leaders, casually dismiss the consequences of going to war with a nuclear-armed nation. Dismiss the consequences of nuclear war, like it's not even worth thinking about. But it is worth thinking about. They tell us daily Vladimir Putin is evil and insane, and that may well be true. But this same man has threatened to use nuclear weapons against the United States and Western Europe if this continues. And why don't we believe him?
Yeah.
You may have missed this. The New York Times didn't seem to have time to cover it. But here's Russia's foreign minister just last week underscoring the point.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov with a chilling warning. The risk of nuclear war is a real one. Speaking to state-run media, Lavrov said, quote, "The danger is serious. It is real. It cannot be underestimated."
I mean, of course he said that. That's really the only thing that Russia has that's preventing them from being annihilated immediately. I'm pretty sure if they didn't have nuclear weapons, if they didn't talk about them all the time, we would have a much different situation. That doesn't mean they're necessarily gonna be using those weapons, although that possibility is definitely there. Using strategic nuclear weapons to hit Ukraine would be completely pointless and would escalate immediately. Using strategic nuclear weapons to attack NATO countries or the US would be just suicide. Using tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, that's a real possibility, sure. But I also think that wouldn't escalate as quickly either. So I'm not really sure what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to... It's like having a gun and pointing the gun to just random people and, robbing them because you have the gun. So, okay. So we just let them do that. In case of nuclear weapons, it could be, okay, a hand grenade maybe. Okay, but we would still do something, right, to neutralize that threat, which is what we're trying to do. We would negotiate with them, but we wouldn't let them go, right? The police wouldn't just let them go. They wouldn't let them come again with the same hand grenade and rob another place, right? So I'm a little confused on what we need to do when there's a rogue country with nuclear weapons attacking neighboring countries. Do we just let them do it? Is that what we're supposed to do? If so, I would like to explore that argument a little bit. It seems a little silly.
He added that he did not want to see these risks of nuclear war, quote, artificially inflated.
He does not see it as an artificially inflated risk, says Lavrov. So what they're saying is, we will use nuclear weapons against you and your allies if you don't back off. If, for example, this seems existential, like you're trying to overthrow our government. It's hardly...
Nobody's trying to overthrow the Russian government. There are people talking about it, of course, as people talk about things like that all the time, but nobody's actually trying to topple Putin. For one thing, that would be extremely hard. Another thing, it would be, I feel, very counterproductive. I think it's a bad idea overall. Maybe I'll talk about it in a separate video, but I think, quote unquote, toppling the Russian government would probably be a really, really bad idea. I'm not sure if Tucker understands that or not. I'm pretty sure the Biden administration does. Probably Zelensky as well.
Defense of Russia to say that's a real possibility, and has been for quite some time. So it was 2 years ago that Vladimir Putin revised Russia's nuclear deterrent policy. Now, the new policy allows Russia to use nuclear weapons in response to a conventional strike. That means some sort of non-nuclear provocation. Now, in March, Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev, who sits on Russia's Security Council, reminded our country of this policy. He warned Joe Biden that Russia would indeed use nuclear weapons against the West in response to any, quote, act of aggression that is committed against Russia and its allies. Now, what would that look like? Would it include helping to shoot down a Russian transport plane carrying hundreds of Russian troops?
No way. No way would the escalation be, hey, this plane was shot down and then Putin does a nuclear strike on a NATO base or something. He would have to be completely insane, and the whole group of people surrounding him and people actually executing the orders would also have to be pretty unhinged for that to happen. To illustrate the point, the tactical nukes are in their warehouses. They're not even close to being deployed. It's just stock. The strategic nukes, does Tucker really think that he's gonna use a strategic nuke to react to a plane being shot down with 100 people? The United States killed, I think, 200 Russians in Syria already, who tried to storm, I think there was it a military base, was it a factory, something like that. The Wagner group, which is basically mercenaries from Russia, so they weren't officially Russian soldiers, tried to attack the, I think it was a base where the United States, I'm not sure if it was Army or Marine Corps, but there were soldiers there that were the US soldiers. And you can find this online. You can Google the intercepted communications and phone calls, I guess. And you'll hear how this is described as basically Americans raise their flag and just pummel them into oblivion in a couple of minutes with artillery and then gunships. Nobody said anything about that. If anything, Russia pretended that it didn't happen. They reported that 25 Syrian soldiers were killed. They didn't even acknowledge that it was Russians. In reality, it was more than 200. And multiple sources from Russia have independently confirmed this. It's definitely a fact, definitely happened. That's what happens when you kick their ass. They pretend it didn't happen. That's pretty much what happened then. I mean, it's not as if the US doesn't have nukes too. It's not as if Europe doesn't have nukes. There's no way in hell that Russia is able to do a preemptive strike to neutralize all of those. And the retaliatory strike would be incredibly devastating for Russia. They know that. They have no defense against that. They have nothing in terms of advanced anti-air, technology. And even if they did, like the US, well, they do have advanced anti-air technology. Let me correct myself. It's not going to be super effective in this case, okay? It's going to be very, very ineffective against the weapons that are created for strategic nuclear strikes. Some of the rockets will be neutralized, but that's going to be a very, very small minority. So what's the end game? To just commit suicide? Okay.
Pentagon has admitted doing that. You don't have to be for Russia to see that as a pretty reckless act, and not just doing it, but then bragging about it to NBC News. Where does that get us? We should find out. We do know that Putin has placed Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. And again, Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. And again, why wouldn't he use those weapons? They tell us daily he is evil and insane, and he may well be. A risk? Yeah. But no one in Washington seems worried in the slightest. In fact, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who clearly has nothing to live for at this point, is now calling for a blank check, an open-ended conflict in Ukraine, using the same legal justification that got us into Iraq for nearly 20 years. He wants an authorization to use military force. Watch.
Senator Kaine was with us, and he said it is too soon to begin talking about potential use of force in Ukraine. Do you think he's right?
No, I don't. I don't think we need to be using force in Ukraine right now. I just introduced an AUMF, an authorization for the use of military force, giving the president basically congressional leverage or permission to use it if WMDs, nuclear, biological, or chemical, are used in Ukraine. It doesn't compel the president to do it. It just says if it is used, he has that leverage. There may be a point that we have to recognize, look, this is at prior to World War II, there were moments nobody ever wanted to get involved and eventually came to realize they had to. I hope we don't get to that point here.
Okay, so what he's saying is basically give authorization for the use of military force to Biden in case of weapons of mass destruction basically used. That's not the same justification as for the Iraq war. Not even close. I don't think. I think the justification was that they might possess them, but it's not that they have actually used them. If you don't count the gas, I think, attacks being used against the Kurds, I believe. So it's not really super similar. This may not be a bad idea, because the Biden very likely won't even use it. He's terrified of this scenario, so it doesn't seem likely. So it might not be the worst idea in the world to pre-authorize that, to just have a quicker reaction. But on the other hand, I don't think he actually needs this. I'm not sure if he actually needs this at all for a quick nuclear strike. I don't think he does. I think this is just maybe to just irritate Putin. I'm pretty sure this thing is for extended periods of time, right? AUMF is meant to extend the period of time that he can that the executive branch can do war things without declaring war, right? Or maybe I'm confused.
But we should be ready if we do.
Prior to World War II, says Adam Kinzinger. So last year, Adam Kinzinger was a guy who'd been redistricted out of his own district and who was trolling for some kind of cable news contributorship. The future looked grim for Adam Kinzinger. Now, Adam Kinzinger is on the Sunday shows every weekend doing his Winston Churchill imitation. So you can see there's a built-in incentive for mediocre and intellectually limited members of Congress to play the war hawk. But you have to ask yourself, why all of a sudden is everybody talking about chemical and biological weapons? It was just a couple of weeks ago that Joe Biden, the President of the United States, promised to respond, quote, in kind to the potential use of chemical weapons.
There was actually a video of people being affected by something. Now, was it a chemical weapon? Very likely it was. This happened, I think, on Azovstal factory, so it could have been just a fake thing done by Azov to provoke response, or it could have been true. I think we also saw this in a separate place. So I remember 2 instances of this happening. And then I think Ukraine said that they're verifying this, and I haven't seen any confirmation of anything actually happening. So it could have been just I guess there was a benign explanation of this just being a panic thing where people start thinking they're poisoned, or there could have been actual, chemical weapons used. But anyway, it's not nothing. There was cause to believe that something was going on. It looks like nothing actually happened, but I'm not sure.
By Russia. In other words, the United States would use its chemical weapons against the Russians if they used theirs against the Ukrainians.
Yeah, so Biden said that we'll respond in kind when being questioned about chemical weapons. I think that's just Biden doing one of his gaffes. I don't think it was I don't think he actually meant that. So.
And then, because you're not supposed to admit that you have chemical weapons, Joe Biden's national security advisor, whose memory still works, walked it back and told us, oh, no, the president misspoke, just like he did when he told us this was a regime change war. We would never use chemical weapons, said Jake Sullivan.
I mean, the U.S. Come on. The U.S. would not use chemical weapons because chemical weapons are really inefficient. They would never... Why would the U.S. need to use chemical weapons? I mean, it's just silly.
But for some reason, a lot of people in Washington, in both parties, are still talking a lot about the U.S. using chemical weapons in Russia. Here's one of the most limited members of Congress, Michael McCall, Republican from Texas, widely regarded as a mouthpiece for the intel agencies. Listen to what he says.
Okay.
What would happen if a chemical weapon was dropped in Ukraine and/or a short-range tactical nuke? The question there is, would the world idly sit back and watch that happen without doing anything?
Honestly, it's pretty likely, although I'm hoping that there would be some reaction. Some reaction would, of course, be appropriate. But it's just the fact that the politicians are so terrified of nukes. They don't understand them. They don't understand how they work. They don't understand the impact. They don't understand that they're not like they're depicted in movies. It's not going to be Hiroshima again. It's going to be a little different. They definitely don't understand the tactical nukes. So there's a very real possibility, honestly, that no reaction will happen. It's very possible.
What should we do?
I just find it hard to believe, and when I talk to the Secretary General of NATO, their job is really to defend NATO, not trigger Article 5. But in my judgment, that's beyond the pale. That crosses a red line. And I think if that happens...
We all know that we never allow red lines to be crossed without consequences, right, guys? Thanks, Obama.
We would have to respond in kind.
Okay, he did say in kind, and he's not old and senile, so I'm assuming he does mean that the U.S. it starts using chemical weapons or tactical nukes. Okay, yeah, he did say that.
So stories like this give people like Michael McCall a chance to give you a moral lecture on television, which is the whole appeal. But again, all of a sudden you have sitting members of Congress with access to high-level intelligence talking casually about using chemical weapons or nuclear weapons against a nuclear-armed state. So it's not a defense of Russia. You don't have to believe Russia was justified in invading Ukraine. They weren't. It's not a defense of Putin to think to yourself, hold on a second here. How did we get here? Talking about nuclear war on the Sunday shows. Should we be? Are we ready for that? It's clear no one in the Biden administration cares or is worried about it at all.
Oh, come on. The Biden administration is terrified of anything nuclear.
The escalation continues at a remarkable pace, and you know that if you watch the money. We're continuing to shovel cash to the government of Ukraine, which just last year Democrats described as one of the most corrupt in the world, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
We're sending money to Ukraine at levels that are astounding. Joe Biden signed off on a funding package in March for $13.6 billion in aid for Ukraine. Then he sent an additional $1.3 billion in late April. Then he sent $350 million in February. He also sent $800 million in March. In addition to all of that, Joe Biden has requested another $33 billion for Ukraine. And that request includes funding for, quote, longer-range artillery of a heavier caliber than the howitzers we've already been sending there. In other words, we're sending artillery to Ukraine that could easily strike Russian territory, and we're sending $33 billion to do it. Now, how much is $33 billion?
Oh my God, this meme about striking the Russian territory is really stupid. It's, yeah. I mean, of course, you would strike targets of opportunity on enemy territory when that enemy is attacking your literal whole territory of your country. What makes them immune from that? If anything, Ukraine has so far not attacked any civilian targets, unlike Russia. So striking targets on Russian territory, that's fine, although the purpose here, of course, is to fight in Donbass, which does require heavy weapons and does require the Ukrainian army to attack.
In a moment when Congress is writing checks for trillions. Well, to put it into context, $33 billion is more than double what the Biden administration spends protecting our national borders. And that's just one check to Ukraine, but it's double the annual budget to protect our borders. The Biden administration, in fact, it's more than double, just requested $15 billion for the entire budget for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and just $8 billion for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So we're spending twice on their borders what we spend on our own in one request, in 1 week. How much is $33 billion? Well, it's more than we spend on Veterans Affairs every month, taking care of our own veterans.
Sure, I mean, yeah. It's nothing compared to the, well, okay, it's not fair to say that number is nothing compared to anything. That is a huge number. But it's a relatively small number in terms of the defense budget. And this is really, you could look at this as one part of the defense budget. It's really Ukraine fighting the war on behalf of NATO without NATO soldiers dying. The Ukrainians are dying. They're fighting using NATO weapons for NATO pretty much. So if you're looking at like that, and I'm pretty sure NATO is looking at it like that, then it becomes a matter of, okay, how much are we willing to spend to eliminate this crazy rogue nuclear armed country that's invading neighboring country and getting closer to invading NATO countries.
And the saddest point of all of this is, it hasn't caused the Russians to withdraw from Ukraine, and no one's claiming that it will. It hasn't bankrupted Putin. It hasn't crippled the Russian economy. It certainly hurt our economy.
Yeah, I don't think anybody realistically expected anything like that to happen this soon. The war has been going for a relatively short time, and these things do take time. My guess would be that we will start seeing the effects of this right after the famous parade day, May 9th. I think it's going to be a little bit harder to keep the truth from the Russian people and to keep the economy artificially propped up as it is. It's doing its thing, it's working, but they're kind of, you know, how irradiated people get to live for a couple of weeks and then they die and they feel more or less okay, but they're actually going to die 100%. There's nothing they can do about it. That's the Russian economy pretty much right now.
What's going on here? Well, the Daily Mail is reporting that a Russian oligarch with close ties to Vladimir Putin, he's on the bad guy list, right? No, because he met with the president's son in Moscow several times to discuss investment deals. So that oligarch, strangely, is being sanctioned by the UK, but not by the Biden administration. The Biden administration, for all its bellicose talk about Russia, has decided not to sanction the one oligarch who's friends with the president's son.
And now we're going into Hunter Biden. I don't care about this. I may want to talk about it at a later date, maybe with Vladimir, but for now, I'm going to just ignore the Hunter Biden thing.
So just to restate, this has nothing to do with Ukraine. The war in Ukraine does not have anything to do with Ukraine, the long-term fortunes of the country,
Jesus Christ.
or the health and safety of its people. It has to do with a lot of other things. The Biden administration's request, for example, for Ukraine aid, didn't see this coming, includes a pathway to citizenship for Afghan refugees, their spouses, and children. Quote, the Secretary of Homeland Security, in the Secretary's discretion, may adjust the status of an Afghan national to that of an individual lawfully admitted for permanent residence. Oh, so in an aid package meant to defend the borders of another sovereign nation, we continue to degrade our own. Bet you didn't think defending Ukrainian democracy meant admitting tens of thousands of more foreign nationals into this country overnight.
Okay, no comment here. My guess is that it's just bundling the way it usually gets done, but yeah, this is something that's that has bilateral support. So I'm pretty sure that's the reason to put in something that's relatively unpopular.
If you want to know why our leaders are determined to escalate this conflict, there's your answer. It means more power for them. It means revenge for the 2016 election. And if that means triggering a nuclear conflict between our nation and theirs, so be it.
Okay, well, he's more eloquent than Jimmy Dore. A lot of very, very similar points, I would say, and I think he has a real chance of this kind of talk. I think is resonating with a lot of people who want simple explanations and are looking to confirm things they already believe. And I think this is gonna work really well. This kind of pitch sounds very consistent, sounds very logical. It's not trivial to dismantle. I would love to be talking to him, of course, or somebody who's holding these same positions, but this is not, I think, Elijah. Laden and I were, Laden and I were commenting on. This is not even Jimmy Dore, who's just parroting things that he heard, I think, without deeper thought. I think Tucker is a level up, and I think he would do really well in a presidential race, which I guess if he were president, the US wouldn't do anything in this situation. So I guess we need to hurry up with that war and get it done before that happens, because it's super possible. Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought then. Please subscribe. We're trying to build the channel, and get more people to learn about us. So I'd appreciate a subscribe, a comment, a like, all the usual things. Thank you.